This video is brought to you by Wix. Get your free website in the link down below. They're coming for gaming PCs, everyone. Super small clients connected to gaming PCs in a server somewhere are going to replace all consoles and desktops forever. Well, maybe not so much. In a relatively short space of time, the story of cloud gaming has taken a very interesting turn. For those unfamiliar with the concept, as video compression technology and internet infrastructure improve, there's this growing idea of changing the familiar model of running a game on a local, powerful enough machine to running the game on a powerful server somewhere else, compressing a video feed of the game back to a smaller or weaker device through the web and relaying back the controller or keyboard inputs. It requires a fast internet connection, but only a very modest local PC, thus somewhat making the concept of specs obsolete. This is not on itself a new idea. OnLive tried this back in 2010, and it did not go well. And on its wake, a number of small niche services have tried different versions of this formula with different degrees of success, and I did a video exploring a lot of them. In the meantime, there has been an interesting miniature explosion of mainstream interest in the concept. Google, a company known for launching all sorts of crazy experimental ideas as products and then seeing which ones stick around, did a brief experiment running on the Chrome browser. And there are rumors of them announcing their own streaming service/console on GDC. I'm attending GDC and publishing this video right before I leave, so I plan to keep an eye on this. If that happens, and you want to know my opinion, Twitter, Instagram, or the community tab is the place to keep an eye on. Nintendo currently allows playing some games that are too heavy for the Switch using cloud computers in Japan. Sony has a service to play a very specific selection of PS4 games on a very specific group of countries, which funnily enough is based on OnLive technology, which they purchase. But the more interesting recent development comes from the hand of a company that has a very large influence both in computing and gaming as a whole, Microsoft. For the last generation, it is more noticeable how Microsoft is moving away from the classic strategy of creating the best console possible and getting people in with exclusives, and is more and more using the Xbox brand as a service rather than a device. Xbox exclusives keep showing up on PC as the dreaded Universal Windows app with some major exceptions, and there seems to be a growing experiment of basically running the same game in both places. However, the big surprise is xCloud. As its console presence loses priority, Microsoft has been pouring resources into what essentially is their own gaming platform where the interface for playing could be a phone, a tablet, a small TV box, and all the games are run on remote servers. The language Microsoft is using for this is pretty ambitious. It is not a surprise that when news started breaking of Microsoft working to bring Xbox games to Switch, the rumors pointed out to xCloud being a part of it. So it is not crazy to think that at least one of the big names in gaming is seriously considering a future where console gamers in countries with decent internet infrastructure buy a tiny box to connect to their TV that streams games over an Xbox subscription. The implications of this hypothetical future are interesting for all gamers and definitely for those limited by the low power of the local PC, so naturally, I get curious. Lucky for me, a French cloud gaming company called Shadow released a new version of their gaming box called the Ghost, a light client that connects to their cloud gaming PC. There is no current information on the xCloud service, but it is fair to assume that it will be closer to GeForce Now, in the sense that you will have a selection of compatible games to play. Shadow takes the approach of services like Parsec in the sense that you're basically renting a PC, the whole thing. Their definitely primary use case is installing Steam, Origin or whatever, and gaming there. After all, the PC that you rent seems very, very capable. The Ghost is an interesting device for several reasons. About 2 years ago, Shadow's initial pitch centered around their original Shadowbox, a device that you would rent from them that aimed at replacing gaming PCs entirely, but then they pivoted to offering Shadow as a service that you could use in your current PC or even your phone. And while that is probably the best version of Shadow for someone who already owns some devices and is using to some customization in his experience, I still believe the idea of a dedicated game and streaming box has some merit for a very specific crowd that is more used to consoles. And it seems like someone at Shadow agrees with part of this statement, because they went back to work and revised their old bigger box into a very tiny, very modern, very slick looking device that kind of fits very well under a TV or maybe as a PC substitute. It is light, has enough USB ports for peripherals like keyboards and gamepads, it allows both Ethernet and Wi-Fi connections, and it supports audio over HDMI and headphone jack. It has no fans and makes no noise, and it is so power efficient that Shadow was confident enough to say it could save around $100 in yearly electricity cost if used instead of an equivalent full PC. But what do you actually get here? After logging in with your Shadow subscription that is required to use the device, you get a very minimalistic setting screen, and you can connect to your Shadow computer and start using to play games. It's very straightforward, and under good conditions it works darn well. There are people online using way more sophisticated methods for testing a cloud service like this under load, but I was still curious if I will be able to measure a difference in latency, so I ran a simple reaction test. The average reaction time of a healthy human to a visual stimulus is around 250 milliseconds, and I seem to fall right on that average on a local PC. Using the same mouse and monitor but on a Shadow Cloud PC, the streaming adds about 50 milliseconds to reactions. Interestingly enough, using Ethernet does not consistently reduce this impact over 5G Wi-Fi, although Ethernet does provide better stability and image quality outside of the super ideal conditions, since it does not have to deal with the interference. Shadow has shared that they have measured better latency on the Ghost compared to a regular PC due to some low-level optimization they have implemented, which is likely true in more intense conditions, but for me, it can get lost in the normal variation of my reaction time. Again, this is a very unscientific way to measure this, as tons of elements such as VSync and monitor quality can add extra delay to this whole process. It is worth noting that Shadow is very selective on the countries where they provide their service, since they want to ensure the smallest latency possible, and I am outside this list, so they had to make an exception for my testing with the explicit warning that my results might not be ideal, especially with the nearest data center being in Paris. So all things considered, very good results. One bit that I found fascinating was possible uses for the unexpected high amount of USB ports on this thing. They seem to work by transmitting raw USB data over the internet, so most of the time when you connect something, it will show up in your cloud PC, including all the controllers that I tested. Stuff as speaky as wireless headphones with their own USB adapters seem to work mostly without any issues. Bluetooth headphones could also work through their Bluetooth adapter on the Ghost itself. The two things that I could not get working consistently were cameras and microphones. Both will work just for a bit before crashing. This is understandable given that the flow of raw data from a bigger input device over USB is not precisely optimized for network traffic, but it does sadly dash my dreams of using this as a remote content production station, which is likely not the intended use case anyway. I will have to stick to the app for that. Now let me address something first that I'm sure I will see a lot of people furiously arguing in comments, usually before they reach this part of the video, which makes it very easy for me to know who comments before watching the whole thing. For the ultra hardcore hobbyist who is specifically interested in building the most optimal PC ever, this is not going to be a substitute to owning a PC, especially since not having access to hardware will drive them insane. Which is in part why I ultimately don't think that in the developed world this will come to substitute gaming PCs altogether for everyone, since the whole idea of building or customizing a PC is for some part of the experience itself. But replying, just build a PC to this concept ignores the entry barrier that is understanding how to do that in the first place. Not everyone has a desire or time to learn how to build a PC or pick appropriate components. For that sort of person, this sort of model is going to be a growing, very clear alternative to consoles as fiber connections become more common. Another use case that I initially thought would not be satisfied by cloud gaming is those who spend on higher end setups, not just for high settings but to be able to play in 4K or high refresh rates. But surprise surprise, since I last experimented with this concept, Shadow has added support for either a 4K 60Hz image or a 1080p image at 144Hz, and since I have the internet bandwidth to spare, I gave it a try to see if that was even feasible in the Ghost, and the results were surprising. I don't own a 4K monitor, but I do own a 4K capture card, and it does seem to be able to do the promised 60 FPS in full 4K without many issues. I threw the Far Cry New Dawn benchmark on low settings, but 4K, which the 1080 on the cloud machine can do over 30 FPS, and could not notice any drop frames or image lag. I do own a cheap 144Hz monitor, so I could try 1080 at high refresh rates, and oh boy, this is impossible to capture in a 60Hz video camera, but believe me, this is definitely on high refresh rates. Once again, without any visible drop frames or visual issues, so yeah, if you have a good fiber internet connection, even some people who prefer 4K or high refresh rates could be satisfied. I don't know how Shadow managed to make this work so well, honestly. However, since we're talking about the hypothetical future of cloud gaming, there's a section for that interview/feature about xCloud that alarms me a bit. The corporate vice president of cloud gaming at Microsoft quoted 2 billion as the number of people playing games worldwide and correctly stated that a lot of those are in places where consoles are not feasible or accessible, and maybe xCloud could be the answer to that. But I'm pretty sure a metric ton of you living in those countries probably saw what I'm about to point out in that statement. For cloud gaming to work this well, you need a very good connection and being close to a server. Shadow so far seems to understand this. Not only do they make it clear that they recommend a bandwidth of at least 15 megabytes per second, hopefully over fiber, but they have a very specific list of countries where they have servers and that they can guarantee this level of latency that I have shown, which is also why they charge a comparatively higher price, which is not that bad if you use it as a computer beyond gaming for sure. People in those critical 2 billion might be in places like Brazil and India, and they might be stuck on internet infrastructure that is just not up to this sort of macro expansion that Microsoft seems to hint about. There might be banking on the increased quality of mobile 4G internet in a lot of developing countries, or even the power of 5G, which has proven to do some really amazing stuff under ideal conditions. But that might prove to be very expensive. Only time will tell. I do think cloud gaming will become more and more of a clear option for a lot of people, but it will take a dramatic shift in internet quality worldwide for it to become as ubiquitous as movie streaming. Maybe it's just a matter of time. Regarding the Ghost itself and Shadow, it is definitely impressive the improvements being made on this technology while it still remains a niche service. They're making some changes to the pricing structure, which points to them still experimenting on how to make this concept its high quality while still being affordable, and the Ghost itself is an extra measure in making it the full replacement of a gaming experience, even if it comes at a bit of a price that makes it difficult to measure up to a cheap console, although the addition of the high refresh rate or 4K support does make things way more tempting. So I will definitely keep this Ghost connected to my TV, where I'm sure it will be plenty useful. But I'm not putting up my PCs for sale anytime soon. What I will keep putting up is parts from older videos or failed projects that I do no longer need in lowspecsurplus.com. My plan was to keep this thing stocked quicker, but you guys are fast. I've had stories of musicians who want stuff from their album covers, engineering students in need of parts, and fans from all over the world who just want a souvenir. The idea of lowspecsurplus.com is simple. I will keep putting up stuff that I do not need at a small price plus shipping, and if you want anything there, you just have to contact me and convince me as to why I should send it to you. Rather than make money, I'm looking for good stories of fans that would like to give this thing a new home. I am having literally the busiest period of my life so far in 2019 with all the conferences and videos, so I'm glad I'm able to maintain a simple but professional looking website with minimal work thanks to Wix, this video sponsor. If you have a business, a portfolio, or just a silly idea like mine, you should have a website, and Wix makes it very easy to have a professional looking website for free. Try out Wix in the link down below. Thank you to them for sponsoring this video and for supporting this channel for this long, and you for watching.